snakes and bears and stuff. Snakes, they'll coil up and they'll just expand, look huge. And then bears, they'll get up on their hind legs just to make themselves look massive and fearful. Fake it till you make it. Pretty much what this is going for is it possible to condition yourself into becoming a more confident person just through posing? And one of my examples would be bodybuilders. They look at bodybuilders, they're not just sitting there, lifting. They go into competitions and they sit there and they pose, make themselves expand, look huge, intimidating, and they feel powerful. It's a sign of power. How can posing in specific ways change personal opinions on one's own power? How does this, does actually posing like this make you feel like this, or does it, yet again, are you just faking it until you make it? All right. So these were all the questions that were burning Amy Cuddy and all of her associates. Can this actually help people change, not just posture through thought, but does it actually change you physically, on the inside, make you a more confident person? Which leads us to their study. Now their methods. What they did is they took 42 participants, 26 male, 16 female. And they told these participants that it was a study on electrocardiographs and the placement of the electrodes on their body and position to their heart. That's how they were able to position these people, make them get into certain poses without them knowing what exactly the study was about, keeping them completely blind to what was truly going on. They took 97 or no. How did they choose what positions to do? You can't just say, oh, this position is more powerful than the other. You got to have a consensus to what positions actually show power. So they took 95 pre-test participants, meaning they took them in beforehand and surveyed them on what certain poses display power. And they came up with, for high power posing, putting your feet up on a desk, or just asserting your dominance through, say you're at a meeting. This is what we're going to do, folks. It's a sign of power. And in contrast, here are the low power poses that were chosen. Making yourself look small, condensed, arms crossed, and sitting down, same situation. I'm sorry, these pictures are a little hard to see because they're in black and white, but they're sitting down and they get all folded up. It doesn't really, when you look at it, it doesn't show power at all. They took these, pretty much what they wanted to get here was a feeling of, is this pose expanded or open as compared to a closed? So who cares if they pose? What's the big deal about it? After they had these people pose, they took them in, had them pose for a couple minutes in each stance, and afterwards they measured their willingness to take risks. Now, before they actually had this, before they performed this section of the study, they took a saliva sample about, just to test different things like testosterone or cortisol. Testosterone because that's the fight or flight, hormone, and then cortisol because it's the stress inducer. So what they did is they gave all the participants $2. Just take $2, and they wanted to see whether or not the high power posers, there was a difference between the high power posers in gambling and the low power posers. So they had two options. They could either just flat out keep the money, $2, yippee, or they could go double or nothing. They had to roll the dice. It was a 50-50 chance whether they would double or not. And then after they had done this, they took another saliva sample 17 minutes afterwards to measure if the levels had changed at all. Okay, so once they had collected all this data, what do you do with data? You analyze the results. Obviously the variables, testosterone, cortisol, whether they were not, whether they're willing to take risks or not, and they had them fill out a self-questionnaire, self-assessment. I love these variables simply because not only is it qualitative, or quantitative, but you've got quantitative as well. It gets all aspects, numbers say enough, but it's really numbers coupled with how do you feel. So, let's take a look at these graphs. These were taken after they had done the risk, measured all the saliva and everything. Their testosterone, afterwards, these are basically the mean, once it gets up to the graph, and then the extra line in the middle is the standard deviation. Every test has a little deviation here and there. But basically, the testosterone in the high power posers, which is on the left side, is much higher than the low power posers. There was an increase after posing in a high power stance as opposed to decrease. On the flip side, with cortisol, the high power posers showed decreased cortisol, where the low power posers showed an increase in cortisol. So basically, their testosterone rises, cortisol lowers. That is the best possible outcome because you increase that feeling of the fight or flight response, testosterone, a lot of fight, but there's less stress, so less immune to change. For risk, they said 86, roughly a little bit over 86%, showed an increased chance to take the risk. 86% of the participants who posed in high-powered positions took the gambling bet, as opposed to the others, only 60% gambled their money away. Well, not away, but they just attempted to gamble. For the self-assessment, for the high-power posers, they reported feeling significantly more in control and powerful as opposed to the low-power posers. I mean, basically beating a dead horse here, but all points towards their hypothesis being correct. Now, how can we apply this? What is its importance? This can be used pretty much for everything. If you have to, before presenting a speech, say you find an empty classroom next door and you decide to power pose a little bit in it, it could help. Or, if you're going in for a work meeting, power posing for a couple minutes beforehand, it'll help. Same thing, classroom participation, which is actually Amy Cuddy herself. This is how the whole thing was started. She decided to, she's a teacher at school, and she noticed that there was a difference between, the people that sit there, raise their hands like this, and the people, that actually forcefully like, hey, choose me, choose me. And she's like, all these people have the same intelligence, yet, their postures and everything are affecting their participation grades, which was a big factor. Same thing with job interviews. If you go in 2 minutes beforehand, take the time, high power pose. They say that they brought in people in a study afterwards. They had all the high power posers go into a job interview, and they had researchers watch. And they're like, we would definitely, the researchers didn't know who were the high power posers and low power posers, so they were completely blind. They watched the tapes and they said, we would definitely hire like these people, they feel more confident, I mean, they all had the same skill set. It was just that their physical, appearances, their nonverbal communication said that, I feel confident in this, I'm strong in this. So, yeah, it's just basically bibliography. Power posing, it's a very effective way. It can impact your life. Fake it till you become it, not till you make it.